Welcome to the Fatigue Files, a podcast that explores fatigue conditions from as many angles as possible while pushing the boundaries of thinking about fatigue as a signal to the 21st century and beyond. Cutting-edge thinking, practical strategies, thought-provoking explorations. They're going to all be here, and I'm your host, Anna Greer, welcoming you to this edition of the Fatigue Files. I am delighted to have with me again the wonderful Dr. Terry Marks-Tarlow, who is a clinical psychologist of enormous experience. And some of you might be familiar with her from past interview on the podcast when we spoke about attachment. And today we're talking about dreams and all things dream work. So Terry, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me back. I am delighted to be with you and delighted to talk about dreams today.
I'm very excited to talk about dreams. Being a bit of a fan of working with the unconscious, dreams to me are an extraordinary mine of incredible insight. So Terry, in your experience, how do you frame dreams when you're working with clients?
Well, Anna, I'm sure you know that my big interest is both creativity and clinical intuition. And I have to say that dreams are as varied as people. And so I can't even say that there's a single way that I look at dreams because it really depends on who's walking through the door and what role that they have. But I'll give you an example. I have a patient right now who is an artist and is just transitioning from art as more of a sideline to other ways of making money, to being able to make money completely through his art. And he is bringing in dreams very regularly, so it depends on whether people bring dreams in at all. But we're using his dreams as a lens into his unconscious and then linking that to his artwork and what's happening in his artwork. And as we're doing that, his art is exploding in the world. He's currently in Iceland for a show and has representation now in Los Angeles and New York. And it's very exciting because dreams are often the cutting edge of creative processes. And so for anybody interested in their own creativity, being able to track dreams and move with them and understand how the unconscious often is way ahead of the conscious mind in terms of transformational processes. And so being able to really track that through dream work is very exciting and very fun.
One of the things that strikes me here, particularly in relation to the needs and concerns of this audience, many of whom have chronic fatigue conditions, is the power of creativity to open up healing. And dreams, it seems to me, are an important tool in opening up creativity and energies and understanding the unconscious processes that working with dreams can make more conscious, so that we can work more intelligently with the deep self that otherwise lurks in shadow and might be the source of repressed energies. So could you speak to that?
Absolutely. Beautifully said, Anna. I think you really put that very well. And dreams, it's very interesting that not only are dreams kind of at the forefront of creativity, as you said, but they also can be at the forefront of illness and of healing. And so there are many kind of famous cases of dreams indicating illness first, and people being able to diagnose themselves through dreams, or healers being able to diagnose through through people's dreams. And by the same token, healing imagery comes up through dreams, healing processes come up through dreams. And unfortunately, trauma comes up through dreams very regularly, and then becomes an opportunity to heal the trauma. And trauma is often at the basis of chronic fatigue type of conditions, especially stress and pushing the body too hard without the awareness of crossing the limit in the body, and without being able to tune into the body signals. So it's really wonderful to then do so through dreams.
And it's almost as dreams themselves are a way of crossing the limit, aren't they? They come from depths that in some senses can feel very walled off, and perhaps even unconsciously. We sometimes don't even know what we don't know, as it were. It's so buried. And then dreams, it seems to me, are these almost quasi-magical eruptions over the limit that hint, that push, that symbolize, that use metaphor and use senses. Often you can wake up with a felt sense of a dream in the body, even when you can't fully remember the dream. There's a sort of resonance in the body of the dream state. How would you go about working with those? If you were working with a client and they came to you and they had a dream that signified something to them that they couldn't quite access, where do you begin with them, Terry, in terms of helping them become articulate in their communication with their own dream maker?
Right. Well, and dreams are, as you say, a beautiful road or portal into the unconscious. And they're one of the few processes that are both conscious and unconscious at the same time. And we don't have too many of those. So breathing is an example, and which is why breath work is so powerful, is because we are ordinarily completely unconscious of the breath and how we are breathing, but we can become conscious and we can use that. Swallowing is another one. We tend to do that unconsciously, but we can do that consciously as well. And so dreams are kind of magical in being in being a portal like that. One way that I really like to look at dreams for people that have conditions that they're needing to heal, whether it's trauma or fatigue or pain, chronic pain, is looking at repetitive dreams, and especially repetitive childhood dreams, because I have come to believe that repetitive childhood dreams speak the language of early preverbal attachment dynamics, and that they're providing a kind of a visual and full sensory landscape of the early preverbal time when the attachment system is being put into place. And so understanding the meaning of a repetitive dream is, and those childhood dreams can be extremely helpful as a foundation. So, for example, when some people have repetitive dreams of being out in the desert in a barren landscape, and that may signal a kind of abandonment and feeling all alone in a world that is not rich with interpersonal connection, is one example. Sometimes people have repetitive chasing dreams, and those tend to be trauma-ridden dreams about being violated, space being violated, or running away from one's own unconscious and feelings as a result of being violated in some way, is another example. Can I tell you the story that I mentioned ahead of time? This is a crazy one. I'm on a consciousness listserv with Deepak Chopra, among other people in the consciousness realm. And we were somehow talking about dreams. I can't remember how that came up. And a woman on the listserv spoke about a repetitive childhood dream. She kept having a dream about her grandfather. I think it was that her grandfather was getting shot, was her dream. And over and over, she had this. And when she got older and was a young adult, she learned at the point that her father told her about a watch that her grandfather had, she learned that her grandfather had been in the war and had been shot, and the watch had stopped the bullet from entering his heart. And I think her dream was that he was getting shot through the heart, or either he was or she was. And so this watch had this big dent in it because it stopped the shot. And when the father took the watch to a watchmaker, he was wanting it to work again. He was actually not wanting to remove the dent, but he didn't say anything. And the watchmaker removed the dent, and the woman never had the dream again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that was a really interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. And so the uncanny quality of dreams, both in being prognostic, sometimes precognitive. There are famous dreams in history that are precognitive, and kind of telepathic, where the open channels of the unconscious, because I do believe that the unconscious is an open channel relationally, and that the closer we are to one another, the more that channel is opened and the greater the accessibility if we are open to messages of this kind. And so people often receive signals from other people they're close to in their dreams. But of course, we're receiving dreams all the time. We don't know whether something is true or isn't true. But some people wake up with a sense of urgency, contact that person, and indeed there is some connection between the dream, almost as if the dream is a form of remote viewing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes there's a qualitative difference in our own experience of dreaming. So sometimes we wake up and there's a sense that the dream is processing internal material, and we can almost feel that, right? We can almost feel that, we were processing the day before, but it's come into a strange relationship with something somebody said, and that's resonant with a theme that we've been reflecting on or struggling with in our meditation or whatever. And then there are other dreams when you wake up and you just know that it was a really significant interventional kind of dream where something is speaking into your life.
Absolutely, yes.
So there are different kinds of qualities. But when we work with dreams ourselves, Terry, what kind of tools do you use with clients where they can actually start playing with the idea that, for example, everything in the dream is representing some aspect of the self?
I was just going to start there. That's the Gestalt way of working with the dreams, is actually seeing every single aspect of the dream, including material aspects, rocks or chairs or what have you, as an aspect of self. And one way of working with that is choosing parts that stand out to the person or to the person working with the person, and having internal dialogues, or having that giving a voice to that part. Now, of course, Jung's way of working with dreams was called active imagination. And so the dream can be continued into a whole guided imagery or imaginary scenario following the dream. So you might take the dream somewhere new. So that would be another way of working with it. In the graphic novel that I and Leanne Domash just produced, which is called The Eel and the Blowfish, and it's a story about trauma and resolution and dream work. We use a method that Leanne specializes in, and this is also a Jungian method. It's Bosniak's embodied imagination method, and the way that way works is that you or the person working with you picks 3 elements from the dream. Two of those elements tend to be old elements, something reflecting the past, and one of those elements something new. And then you find where each of those elements are reflected in the body. So this is a nonverbal way of working with dreams, and a somatic way of finding the spots in the body that each of those reflect, and then practicing integrating all 3, the 2 old elements and the new one, and practicing 5 to 10 minutes a day, every day, or 20 minutes for a number of days, and then seeing how, or feeling, really more than seeing, feeling how there's a kind of a transformation, a transmutation of those elements at a body level. The science of dreams is really interesting. When I went to college a long time ago in the 1970s, I went to Stanford, and there was one of the most famous dream and sleep and dream people, a guy named Dement was doing research, and he was, there were 2 people that filled the entire auditorium for their class. It was Dement and Zimbardo, both of whom were putting on shows as they were doing it. But at that time, we really didn't know the meaning, the significance of either sleep or dreams. There just wasn't enough advancement in science to really be able to empirically understand, even though, of course, intuitively we sense things like what we're talking about right now. But the science has really progressed, and we now know that learning and memory consolidate during sleep, and especially during dreams, and that dreams are a time when creative activity is going on. The dream itself is a kind of consolidation of material, as you say, some of it from the residue of the day and how that might trigger things from the past. And it's also really interesting, I think, from Indigenous culture point of view, that some cultures consider dream time more real than waking time. Mm. And from this point of view of consolidation and being ahead, there's lots of truth to that the unconscious is showing something, revealing something, doing action that's significant ahead of time. But also shamanic travel happens often during dreams. People put themselves in dreamlike states in order to heal others. All of that is kind of consistent with how science is progressing. I just heard something really interesting about sleep the other day, that we go through, for those people listening who don't know the different stages, we go through various stages several times in an evening when we're sleeping, and it goes deeper and deeper, and then there's a REM stage of sleep. The REM is the rapid eye movement. That's when the dreaming occurs, and the brain processes going on during REM sleep are identical to ordinary perception, except that the muscles are paralyzed. So there's a kind of reality that doesn't depend on gravity or the real world and this sort of thing. And so we're freer in dreams than anywhere else, in a sense. It's like being in a gravityless or lawless environment where the imagination can take us anywhere. But the thing I learned is that the first stage of sleep, the first time we get into it, is the stage that cleanses the brain of toxins. And if we don't get into it organically, if we're traveling or if we're continually changing our circadian rhythm because we're working in the middle of the night, we're on the late shift, or we're changing when we go to bed all the time, it doesn't clear the brain of toxins, which is why people that are not having a consistent sleep schedule often die sooner, they get sick sooner, they age faster, etc. So when people that travel all the time often have these problems. So it's really good to go to bed at pretty much the same time every night and have that kind of regularity as a foundation for the body, and cleansing the brain to prepare for the dream state and prepare for receiving the dreams.
And is that the glymphatic system that you're referring to there?
You know, I think so. I don't know the details, how it is, if it's how much it's lymphatic, how much it's the glial cells of the brain, the supporting cells of the brain. I think that the glial cells are involved. And we used to think that those were like just meaningless.
And, you know, I love the metaphorical resonance here between that cleaning out of the kind of neurobiological level in the early stage of sleep. And then you could easily see the REM process and the dreaming process as a different kind of cleansing, as a psychic cleansing, as a kind of echo of that process in a much more metaphorical realm, which, of course, I'm also struck there with the link to the statement you made about how dream time for certain Indigenous populations is more real than the waking state. And I can fully understand why, in the sense that the unconscious doesn't differentiate anyway between what we think of as imaginal and what we think of as real in the world. But the unconscious freedom in the dream world would be unmediated by the metacognitive interruptions from the cognitive system. And so I can fully understand why that would feel like a more powerful space to be in, because it's not got the little chirpy mind, personal mind getting in the way all the time, interrupting the process. So it allows all those unconscious depth processes and connections to the collective unconscious, even through, you know, archetypal metaphors and so on, to really come into full play. And it's striking, isn't it, thinking about dreams, how the Jungian archetypes and other kinds of archetypes are so resonant across cultures.
Absolutely. And of course, I use fractal geometry for the language of those archetypes, because I think they are fractal self-similar processes that organize everywhere similarly because of our human constitution. But there are, so those in many of those indigenous cultures also have like dream clinics in the morning where the family will around the breakfast table talk about their dreams and share that process collectively I think you just put it really beautifully, that there is an openness of freedom and imaginal landscape that often is hidden by just prosaic nature of everyday life, and so being able to dwell more there, however we do it. I think another thing people can do is draw their dreams, draw an aspect of their dreams, just being able to kind of meditate into the imagery automatically transports us. We don't even need to interpret cognitively, as you were saying, it moves us, it moves our bodies. Many people, when they have nightmares, wake up and feel that their mood is impacted for the entire day. And so being able to talk to ourselves, especially for people that have a lot of trauma and have a lot of nightmares, it's not exactly program our dreams, but develop a relationship with our unconscious by communicating with ourselves as we're going to bed about the kinds of dreams that we would love to have, or moving through the trauma. Another way that I work with dreams often has to do with people that are highly traumatized. And the more traumatized the person, the more the dream tends to have a rigid repetition. Now I remember when the dream thing came up in that listserv. For some reason, I was describing this really, really high trauma case that I have right now, where this man got shot for no reason when he was being a security guard at a very high-end party in Beverly Hills, and a very drunk man wanted to get in for free. And after this man, the security guard told the wife that he didn't have the authority to do that, but he should go inside and he'll be helped there. This man got out of his car, started calling the man, using the N-word over and over again, and then pulled out a gun and shot him an inch from his heart. That's why that woman told the story of having that repetitive dream where she was shot in the heart was her dream. And then she found out about the grandfather, and the dream stopped after the watch got fixed. But this man it was just a horrendous story. He had to wrest the gun away from the man who was going to shoot him again after having been shot. And he is having, when he first came to me, had been having repetitive dreams again and again of the moment of the shooting, of it, identical kind of scene. And that is what PTSD does, is it's the flashes, the sensory pieces are all separated, and it's not a coherent memory. It's a sensory-based memory. And so over and over again, he was having it. But as therapy progressed, the dream started to change, and the dream moved from the exact repetition to different elements. One was the courthouse, where this man is being charged for attempted murder and for a racial crime. But the dream work there has been a gauge for him to see how his progress is happening, however slow it might be. And unfortunately, he was sent to therapy. Like 6 different people had horrific experiences prior to us working together. And so we didn't get to start right away, which is unfortunate with trauma. That the sooner you can sort of get in and try to heal, the better. And that's true with chronic fatigue. It's true with any condition, that if you can catch it right at the beginning edges, there's more flexibility, there's more opportunity to move with it than once it's settled into the body over time and through repetition gets more and more entrenched in our cells. But the progress is good, it's slow, and dreams are a wonderful way of gauging that progress.
And is he actively also experiencing the dreams themselves as part of the healing process?
Well, he is now. He is now, and because I'm helping him reframe them from simply re-traumatizing to this gauge. But he wasn't. I mean, when he first came to me, he actually wasn't sleeping. He couldn't He was terrified to go to sleep. And the reason that happens, that people have a hard time sleeping after they've been traumatized, is the two hemispheres of the brain go to sleep at different times. And the left has to turn off before the right actually puts us to sleep, and the left being the very cognitive verbal one. So if we're spinning worry in our minds when we go to bed, it's much harder to go to sleep because we can't turn that off. And the reason that animals, especially, and there are some animals that will sleep on one side of the brain while being awake on the other, and vice versa. But the reason why this seems to be evolutionarily so is it allows us to scan the environment for danger. We're hyped up. We're feeling there's danger. And then we're going to stay awake because that will keep us from being vulnerable. So if you think about early hominids in the jungle, and there are wild animals there, that kind of alertness could be the difference between life and death. And so being able to quickly sense danger is kind of part of the whole sleep process. And we're never as vulnerable as when we're asleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to just come back to this collective dimension again of this, because the left hemisphere, of course, is the part of the brain that holds the illusion of separateness. And the right hemisphere is the part of the brain that is intrinsically connective and unitive. The idea of, the experience of everything being one. I think here of Jill Bolte-Taylor's experience. She had a left brain stroke, and she only had the right side of her brain online. And she was really happy in this gorgeous, mystical, unitive state. And then obviously recovered her brain function and is now able to speak very articulately about it. But it strikes me again, this idea of how dreams bring us into the oneness, the fundamental oneness, or this fundamental unity or interrelationality of everything that exists. And they have the same kind of emergent properties that we experience when we live from that space. When we live from that space of non-separative thinking, we experience the world as just emerging, phenomena just arising in the field of awareness and all that. And it seems to me that dreams are stunning examples of the bubbling up of something profoundly wise and knowing in not just the human psyche, but the universe itself. And this is where, again, we can connect into that uncanny sense of dreaming, where dreams actually do seem to portend things at times that connect directly with what we think of as the physical world. And I'm thinking here of Jung's famous example of the woman who had a dream about a scarab beetle. And I believe it's true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, I believe it's true that she was fairly stuck in her therapy, and that they'd reached a point where she was really quite rigid. She couldn't find flexibility. And obviously flexibility is the key to healing, right? We get stuck because we get rigid, we get into reality tunnels that lock us down. And so the mind shift is so critical, moving minds. And there she was, and she relayed the story of the scarab beetle, and something hit the window. And I believe Jung opened the window, and there was a scarab beetle. And the synchronicity in that moment between the scarab beetle and the dream opened that woman completely, and she had a breakthrough in her therapy. Now, I find that extraordinarily exciting.
Yes. And that, as you say, was the sort of prototypical example of synchronicity. And for Jung, synchronicity did happen when we're stuck. And if we're stuck on the inside, he believed that the universe bops us over the head on the outside in order to help us move. And indeed, apparently the therapy completely shifted at that point, and she opened up and was much less defensive. What's interesting about that example, Anna, to me, having just been on a podcast, I've been on many synchronicity podcasts recently, because that's my thing. And I have modeled the oneness of the universe that you're talking about by presenting a whole different epistemology than the reductionist one that keeps us thinking everything is separate and we're separate and mind is disconnected from matter and all of that stuff. And synchronicity is such a great example. When the outside mirrors the inside, how can one not have a sense of oneness about the universe? But and I don't think in the way that The Secret talks about it. It's not that we create the universe. It's more that there are these incredible resonances inside. But on one of those synchronicity podcasts, a guy named Eric Wargo, who is very interested in precognition and writes about precognition, which is not something that I have ever been super interested in or even believed in until I read his book, Time Loops, and then used my fractal epistemology to model it. He looks at the example that you just brought up of the scarab and says, that's not synchronicity, that's precognition. The difference between synchronicity and precognition is going to be fuzzy in many ways. The way that he defines precognition is not an awareness of the world outside of us ahead of time, but an awareness of our own brain states from the future, which I think is really interesting. And when I read that, I realized that a dream, the only dream from childhood that I remember that I had, I can tell the dream if you want, and I can tell you how I used to analyze it and then how I revised it. I grew up in New Jersey, and just outside of New York City. And my dad used to work in New York City, so he'd commute in. So one night I had this dream that the Statue of Liberty was tromping over the hillside and the forest outside my window. I was on my childhood bed looking out of the window and saw the Statue of Liberty coming to get me as this huge giant with, big feet coming over the trees. And so I lined up my stuffed animals on the windowsill, dove under the covers, and went to sleep in the dream. And in the morning, in the dream, I wake up and the doorbell rings, and I go downstairs. I open the door. There's nobody there, but outside on the stoop is a miniature Statue of Liberty. I scoop her up, bring her inside, close the door, and that's the end of the dream. So over the years, as I was doing my training to be a clinical psychologist, I brought that dream in. I've interpreted the Statue of Liberty as my mother, my creativity, my liberty, my everything. And I, different stages had different interpretations of what she meant. And then I realized there was a fractal structure to the dream in that the Statue of Liberty is really there at three different scales. In real life, my dad's work, which by the way was in 666 Fifth Avenue. So there's that. There's the monster, and then there's the little one, and the little one wasn't scary, and I brought inside and could incorporate. So I sort of saw that as having a fractal structure. But after reading Eric Wargo's book, I realized it was a precognitive dream because it presaged my interest in fractals. And then when I thought more about it, I had two other memories from childhood that were also fractal. One was the Big Bang just was discovered in physics, and I visualized the Big Bang in contrast to the steady state. It was the steady state that had been the preceding theory of the universe, and it was the steady state that I visualized as a whole universe tucked inside the shoebox of a giant that's in another shoebox of a giant and another shoe. And the concept of infinity coming out of that. And then another childhood memory of being outside my elementary school and looking down and seeing tiny little plants as if I'm the giant and they're the tiny and they're a forest. And so I'm changing scales. So all of this was like I was playing with fractal awareness before fractals were even discovered or invented, which didn't happen until the 1970s. So if we think about that dream as a sort of a future brain state coming back, and especially because Einstein has sort of a past, present, and future all being at the same time, much of what we think of as synchronicity could be precognition, could be both, but definitely all comes back to the oneness.
And also it comes back to the fact that it's always communicative. There's always communication taking place. And this is where I think it really lands for people with fatigue as well, because the body itself and the consciousness that the unconscious and the consciousness that resides and expresses itself through the body is always communicating. And one of the kind of principles of change work that I spend a bit of time reflecting on is the order of the be, do, have. And by stepping into and feeling, somatically inhabiting a future identity, something that we choose to be, if we actually allow that to land almost at an identity level communication with the self, we start to act in ways that identity level identification would enable us to act, which enables results to follow that then confirm the future-facing leaning of the original choice of identity, right? So as people with fatigue, we can inhabit what it's like in our imagination and maybe our memory to be healthy and to inhabit and resonate with that, to know that we are health itself, which is not woo, because all this works, of course, in the somatic field and the neurophysiology of the self. So what you've just been saying about the future kind of the way that your brain was reading your future brain, in a sense, the body can read the future body. And I think dreams actually are a very powerful highway or a portal into those possibilities, whether they're waking dreams where we use the imagination in dream states by choice, or whether they're the kind of dreams that come unbidden in the night. This is where, to me, it all comes together.
Very, very well said. And another recent finding in research in neurobiology is that perception and imagination follow the same circuitry, and that one is a little more bottom up from the body to the mind in terms of sensory and perception and emotional processes, and the other is a little more top down from the mind into the body. And so that's what you're really playing with in what you're saying, that by using imagination to open the space of possibility for the body, and especially the more embodied that imagination is, the more it helps shift. It just shifting from that top down to the bottom up in order for the body to be presenting that as a reality instead of simply imagination.
And I'm reminded here again of an example I often go to, which is athletes imagining using their muscles. They don't actually use the muscle, but the muscle shows developmental signs in response to the imagination. And it just goes to show that the brain has, and I don't think it's just the brain, actually. I think if the mind is distributed through the body. So I think that there's no surprise here that there's a fundamental intimacy, because we're talking about one emergent system with different nuances. But I think it's very inspiring to think that by stepping into an experience we, in theory, haven't yet had, the body responds as if it's the past, and we thus create different experiential states in ourselves that allow us as well to make those mind shifts that enable us to come out of one reality tunnel into perhaps a more resourceful reality tunnel.
Well said.
As ever, Terry, a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. It's so delightful always to explore ideas with you. I absolutely love it.
I do too. And anytime, Anna, that you want to talk again, I am game.
And to all of the listeners struggling with fatigue, I hope this exploration really encourages you to really start exploring your dream life, because the dream maker in you is so wise and so knowing and connected to so many sources of wisdom.
And I echo that hope.